Welcome back to Set Streets and Eats, guys. I'm Chris Bauer. Today, I am in front of a Piggly Wiggly grocery store in Eupora, Mississippi. You might find that strange, but it's actually not. So, as you guys know, from time to time, I do history of retail brands. It's not just fast food or restaurants. I like to kind of do a lot of history of different American brands that were either once really big or still are. At least are still around, and this one is a very old American brand. It's actually over 100 years old. Now, it doesn't start here in Mississippi. It actually starts in Memphis, which is actually where we are going to go in this episode. But I want to start here in Mississippi because this is a great example of one of their older vintage stores. So Piggly Wiggly, a lot of them are franchised, and a lot of them don't have requirements to be updated. So what's really cool about these stores is a lot of them have some very vintage old stores. Now I wish some of these 60s and 50s and below or beyond and back actually still existed, but of course those don't. And the oldest one I could find in the South is behind me, is this 1970s-esque store, and it's a gorgeous store from the pictures I've seen. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to go in there, and when we're talking about the history, see some of what the Piggly Wigglies used to look like in the 70s and 80s. And then we're going to visit Memphis and look where it started. And you might be very surprised at why Piggly Wiggly has affected your life, and I mean you. So let's go check out the history of Piggly Wiggly.
This piggy went to market and this little piggy stayed home. This piggy had roast beef and this little piggy had none. Moral of the story is to get your piggies to wiggle, giggle, jiggle, and hop. Get your little piggies to the Piggly Wiggly. Piggly Wiggly is the place to shop.
Selection and prices that beat all the rest. No wonder the pig is the store I love best. Piggly Wiggly, shop the pig.
I love these old vintage grocery stores. There's only a few left. Most grocery stores obviously update with the times and try to stay current. I sure love small town grocery stores that just keep a nice clean store but keep it looking vintage. There's just such a charm to it that I really enjoy. So how it used to be in grocery stores before Piggly Wiggly changed everything was there would be a building, a grocery store run by a grocer, and you would have clerks and runners and delivery boys, and they would sit around, or not sit around, but wait for people to come in, like yourselves, with their grocery list. And on that list, it would say things like a pound of flour, half a pound of sugar, and things like that. Some rice, or whatever they needed, goods. And then they would hand that list to the grocer and his clerks, and they would take that list to the back, and then they would fill that order. They would measure out the goods, wrap those goods and package them, and then bring those out to you, and then you would purchase them. That had gone on since the Old West days, the general store days. That was how it was done in our country, possibly, in, I assume, around the world. I'm not exactly sure how it was done in other countries, but I assume it was the same thing. But that's how it was done here, all the way up until Saunders changed it all. So that led to a lot of expense, obviously. So it got more and more expensive to get groceries because you're paying more and more people's salaries to do your own shopping for you. So that's why this innovation was so neat. And of course, what do we all do in stores when you're doing your own shopping? We all go to the store hungry, which is always a mistake. You always come in for that one can that you need. And then what do? You see that other thing that you want that looks really good. And you buy that. And then you buy that other thing that looks really good. And pretty soon, you have a whole basket of things you came in that you didn't need or want. And they made more money off you. It's classic, because we all eat. We all have to eat. It's how they get you. And we don't mind, because it's food. It's a pretty good scam that is not really a scam because we all want it. So why should you care about Piggly Wiggly? Well, for one thing, if you've ever been in a grocery store pushing a cart, Piggly Wiggly made that happen. They invented shopping carts. They invented the aisles that you get products for. They invented packaging. Every time you get anything off of these shelves and put it in your cart, you can thank Piggly Wiggly for that honor. Something else Piggly Wiggly created, frozen cases in stores. These didn't exist before Piggly Wiggly. The open cases, the frozen cases, the ones with the doors, the flat cases, those all were Piggly Wiggly inventions. Growing up, we didn't have a Piggly Wiggly. We had Hamady Brothers, which was kind of our local Piggly Wiggly in Flint, Michigan. They, of course, were brought up like by Kroger, like most grocery store chains are. Even a large section of Piggly Wigglies were bought up by Kroger by the 1980s. Of course, by their peak, which would have been in the 1970s, Piggly Wigglies grew to over 2,600 stores nationwide. They were a really, really big chain of grocery stores, being the first. But now today, they're down to about 500 stores, mostly in the Southeast. There is still a grocery company that owns about 100 different stores, Piggly Wiggly stores up in the Wisconsin area and in the Midwest. And so there is a small gap between the southern stores and the northern stores, but still, only about 500 total still exist of this once very large American chain. They even sell out of the old spice racks, the old shelving. We definitely still had ones like that when I was growing up in my grocery store. The old brown shelving, I like those. I love these old produce racks. Check those out. These are straight out of the 60s and 70s. These are the coolest things ever. You don't see many of these anymore. Except in small towns like this. So here we are in Memphis, Tennessee. Right behind me is a marker to this day on the street here at 79 Jefferson Street. This is the former site. It's gone now. It's all part of this block where the first Piggly Wiggly was opened back in September of 1916. Clarence Saunders was a former grocer and clerk. He had been in the grocery business for a while. He had worked kind of all jobs in that industry and had seen how that grocery business had worked for decades. Watched the rising costs and the delivery boys sitting around wasting time between deliveries and watched groceries go up and up in cost for families, and came up with the idea of how to keep the costs down by allowing people to shop for themselves. And when he opened his store, he actually had to take out ads in the newspapers to explain how it worked. It was such a foreign concept to people. They couldn't imagine bringing their coming to a store and going up and down aisles and getting their own groceries, which is hard for us not to imagine it being that way now. Which is kind of crazy now, because if you think about it, since the pandemic, what have we done? But we now order online, have a grocer or delivery person. It's almost like it went back in time, in a way. So, and grocery costs are up. So it is interesting. In 100 years, we've kind of come full circle, going back to the way things used to be. But I digress. Anyway, what's really cool is, while the original location is now gone and no longer with us, you can still go check out an example of how it looked and how it was to experience it not very far from here. And we're gonna go check that out right now. So behind me is the Pink Palace Mansion. This was to be the mansion of Clarence Saunders. Clarence Saunders, of course, the creator of Piggly Wiggly. As we said before, he was a former grocer, clerk, kind of jack of all trades in the grocery business. He had been around the business for several years before getting the idea, or those actually helped him lead him to the idea of Piggly Wiggly's. He started, once Piggly Wiggly launched in 1916, it changed the game. Once people understood the store and understood how to do that themselves, that was it. It was an explosion, lines, and multiple locations starting to open. Hundreds over just the next few years opened. And they just started spreading across the entire nation. Of course, the money was flooding in. He started building this mansion, I believe in 1920 or 21, as, of course, his Shangri-La for him and his family. A beautiful, beautiful mansion. And then in 1922, he entered Piggly Wiggly in on the stock exchange amidst all of this huge growth. And by that point, they had 500 or 600 different stores nationwide in 40 different states. And the growth was just booming. Well, that, of course, had overextended the company just a little bit. And he decided, it's going so well, let's offer a bit more stock. Well, him offering another round of stock coincided with several franchisees failing in New York State. This got the attention of some investors at Merrill Lynch and several others, and they decided that the company maybe not be doing so well as it appeared to be, and they decided to short the stock and do a bear run on it. We'll be most familiar with this recently as in the GameStop bear run. This has only happened a couple times in history. This was, I believe, the first one. Unfortunately, Clarence's ego got the best of him. He did not like this, and he took out a $10 million loan from multiple banks. $10 million in the early 1920s. And it's an insane amount of money. It's a lot of money now, but that was an insane amount of money then. Went to New York and started buying up his own company's stock. The idea being, and I won't get into the minutia of it, you can look up what it means, but if you own all the stock, you set the price, basically. And then when he called for the short stock owners, or short owners, I should say, to turn their money in, which they normally have 24 hours to do, because, as we all know, Wall Street doesn't play by the rules. Their 24-hour window of turning over the money for those somehow got extended by the governing committee to 1 week, and they were able to come up with a new plan, which left Clarence holding the bag, and it ruined him financially. He couldn't pay back the loan, and he unfortunately resigned from Piggly Wiggly, lost his entire fortune, and lost what was under construction at the time, the Pink Mansion. He tried to complete it and tried to raise money to complete it and keep it going. There was a worker that got hurt here that kind of exposed what he was doing of trying to keep it going and raising public funds. That led to a huge uproar. So he really officially lost it at that point, and By the late 1920s, mid 1920s, it was gifted to the city to complete, and they have made it into a museum. And it's been a museum for nearly 100 years now. Today it is the Memphis Museum of Science and History. It's a natural history museum and a modern science museum. And inside they have an homage to Clarence Saunders and his family with a specific homage to the Piggly Wiggly. And that's what we're here to check out. Animatronic dinosaur. Old example of a country store. Everything you would need in some old west town or out in the country. All the little prepackaged products. Let's see, this is how the old bulk used to be. So if you wanted a pound of coffee or a pound of brown rice or some oats, or half a pound of squash or whatever, they would scoop it out and measure it out for you here, and then they would package it up and you would buy that amount. But it was all done at a big counter, and you couldn't buy those goods prepackaged until Piggly Wiggly. So this is the store. This opened in September of 1916. But you would go through the turnstiles. Check this out. So you would come over here, you would grab your shopping basket so you could hold your goods. And then you would just go up and down the shelves, find your prepackaged item, put them in your basket. This was completely new concept. The shelf would have a hanging tag with the price that would be for each item, each can or each prepackaged pound of flour or whatever. This was completely new. And see, this would be where like the flour and everything else was all done up and prepackaged. And then you would have those, they would set those out, sugar and flour and rice and oats. And this led to another innovation actually. So the prepackage of them doling those kinds of things out always led to it being wrapped in plain paper or a plain bag. Well, and then that led to a monogram bag, probably a Piggly Wiggly bag. Well, then later on, as the decades went on, they started, Piggly Wiggly was one of the very first grocery stores to ever start advertising on TV and in print and all that of products. And then products realized they could start doing decorative packaging and get people's attention with different things. So Piggly Wiggly helped pioneer modern day branding, just from being the first to start doing prepackaged items. Before that, again, you bought in bulk. Well, it came in bulk and then you bought just smaller packages. So again, another innovation that they unexpectedly led to was what we deal with now, just branding and having things with colorful labels and how we buy things, what gets our attention at a store. That's all due to Piggly Wiggly. That's pretty cool. These are all products that definitely were not in the store, I would think, in 1916. There was probably a lot more bland packaging wise. It probably grew into this quickly, I would assume. It probably looked a lot more like the country store example. But yeah, when they opened, they had almost 1,000 products, which was about 4 to 5 times what you would see in any general store or a country store up to that point. So coming into that Piggly Wiggly, that first one, was a complete revelation for any shopper. They had never seen that many products in one place, and have access to them was the game changer. And what he quickly found out was what we all do at a store, the impulse buy. So not only did he offer that much more product, but we of course bought more than what was on our list and what we intended to buy, because we're like, well, we gotta try this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this. So he quickly made way more money than anticipated. And of course, the innovations, like they definitely did have the cold cases at the beginning, and then those grew into what they've become before. But they led the innovation. It's pretty neat. And he kind of all just invented that while working as a clerk in our grocer in multiple stores in his young life leading up to this. And it just goes to show you that people's brains work differently at different jobs, you know. We can all be working next to that same job, and someone's looking at the same thing you're doing and that they're doing completely differently, and being like, I know how to do this better. And because this was so out of left field for how people did things back then that they couldn't imagine it. It's pretty interesting and pretty cool. And I appreciate it. I would much rather do my own shopping. I can't imagine having to give a list to somebody and wait for it every time. That would suck. But I think it's a pretty cool invention. But his aisles didn't always go up and down. It always serpentined through the store, so that you went through the turnstile, you couldn't get out. It would also help with theft. You couldn't get out of the aisles until you went through the next turnstiles, which were past the checkout counter. So at the end of the serpentine aisles was the counter. This is where you would get all your items rung up. You would actually get a receipt, an itemized receipt, well, at least a cost itemized receipt, and you would have your packages, and then you would go out the turnstile and exit the store, and on your way to your horse and buggy or newfangled automobile. You know, some people had them. It was 1916. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this history of Piggly Wiggly. I definitely did. I enjoyed doing the research for it. I found out a lot of things I did not realize, that not only did they invent the modern grocery store, but the checkout stand, the shopping cart. In fact, after Piggly Wiggly in the 1930s and 40s, Clarence actually invented what would become a fully automated self-checkout stand that we use today at Walmarts and everything else. But it was ahead of its time. He invented that as well, called the Food Electric. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Either way, the dude had a brain on him. Let's just say that. He was no dummy. And we definitely have benefited from that man's inventions. But one last note. Piggly Wiggly. Where did the name come from? Well, many times people asked him, and his response was normally the same. Piggly Wiggly came from nothing. It was basically so people would ask him what the name was. It was a fun way to advertise. A lot of people speculate he used to tell a story that he saw from a train window going home one night, or from some trip that he saw two pigs trying to get under a fence. That they speculate maybe it came from that, but it means nothing. It's just Piggly Wiggly. They go together, and he figured it would make a good name, and if it really meant something, he never told a soul. So it's interesting, but either way, hope you guys enjoyed this, and We'll see you at the next one, guys. Bye now.